You know, I was counting on my mom to give me a ride today, but she's not here. Surprise, surprise. So I was wondering if you could give me one. Mr. Lombardo, you really wouldn't want me to walk, would you? I mean, like, something bad might happen.
Hello, you are listening to Revenge of the Drive-In. Today we've got two 90s classics, Wild Things from 1998 and director John McNaughton, and 1992's Candyman from director Bernard Rose. I am your host Patrick, and I am joined here by a special guest.
I am Jared McNett. I'll shamelessly shill right at the top instead of waiting to the end to plug. I'm a reporter with the Sioux City Journal up here in northwest Iowa, and I would maybe dispute that both of these are 90s classics.
Well, I have a system in my head. This makes sense to me. You have a movie that's a classic. You have a movie that's a genre classic, which is a step below that, but can be considered a classic by fans of the genre. And you have like a decade classic, which maybe it's not a great movie, but it was like a big deal in the time. Like Single White Female is a 90s classic.
Yeah.
The original Friday the 13th is a horror classic. That's not a classic film. That's an 80s classic too, I guess. The original Top Gun, 80s classic. Not really a classic movie, but it was a huge deal. And people still remember it. So in that sense, that's my justification for 90s classics here. I would argue we've got one very good movie and one... I'm still not sure what to make of Wild Things. I don't, but you know what? We'll get into it because that is what we are starting with. So, Wild Things from 1998, director John McNaughton, who I mentioned already, director of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer,
which is
one of the best movies of its kind.
I think it's probably, and this is going to sound very dorky maybe, but I think it's probably the best movie, or one of the best movies about a serial killer, in part because it's maybe the most responsible movie that's been made about a serial killer.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I've heard people say things like that. Yeah, it's a
because
there's nothing at the genre. Or the topic.
It's a different look at the genre, and there is nothing aestheticized at all about the violence in that movie.
Absolutely.
It is like horrifying and real and grounded, and there is not a single person to root for or like or hope anything for. I did not know that John directed Wild Thing. They're so different in terms of style.
Especially how you framed that, too. It's like, what did you call it? Ethical or responsible? Responsible was the word
Responsible,
you used.
Yes.
I'm not certain Wild Things is a responsible film. It's probably very far from it. Listen, I worked at a high school. I've taught in college. I have been around teens turning into young adults, and listen, Wild Things is just horrifically uncomfortable for me based on just what I've done for jobs. I do think they do something very smart, and whether this was intentional or just this is just how it works out, because this happens in most movies. They cast people that don't look like teens to play the teens. Denise Richards does not look like a teenager. And I think that's to the movie's benefit, because I think those scenes, those sexy scenes, would be so much weirder if she looked younger. You know what I mean?
Oh, they would be genuinely uncomfortable. And I had to check, and Denise Richards in this, it was like a similar situation to Matthew Broderick and Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I figured probably about
like
23.
Late 20s.
Oh, late 20s? Jesus, I didn't know.
I think, mid to late 20s.
I knew she had been around a while, but yeah, let's see. So this is 98. When was she born? 71. Yeah, she's 26, 27 years old when this movie comes out. That's crazy, yeah. And then Neve Campbell, I would guess younger than that. She's born in 73, so also, 24 years old or so, 25. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Wild Things is a movie about, well, it's an erotic thriller. This is the 1990s. Yes. This is the era of erotic thrillers. You had your erotic thrillers in the 80s, the early 80s. It was De Palma, and that was pretty much... Body Heat, I think. That might be a Lawrence Kasdan movie. I don't know who directed that. I always associate that with De Palma. I don't believe it's him. But De Palma was doing that thing in the 80s. It catches on in the 90s. I think it kind of... I would say, even though I haven't seen the movie, I think Fatal Attraction is the one that kind of kicked it off. And then you get movies like Indecent Proposal, Basic Instinct obviously being the big one. Single White Female kind of fits in there. And then Wild Things is coming out in 98, so this is... I don't know if
kind of the tail end.
Yeah, I want to say tail end, but I don't really know much about this genre, like when it would have tailed off. But I do know that by the time 1998 comes around, we've got Zalman King and Skinamax and all that stuff. A lot of direct-to-video, Jim Wynorski erotic thriller schlock. It's tough to say they push the boundaries of nudity further than the theatrical films because Basic Instinct exists, but I think maybe Basic Instinct and Striptease with Demi Moore, those might have been kind of exceptions. The rest were maybe a little bit more restrained, but Wild Things, listen, it's going for it. If you have not seen this movie and you have heard of it, you know it as the threesome movie, probably. This has probably the most famous threesome in film history. Which
until maybe Challengers now.
That's
Challengers is not nearly as risque actually as Wild Things.
Okay, yeah, Challengers has successfully challenged this film, perhaps, but this was, anyways, for decades the threesome movie, and in fact, so much so that I don't know if this will come as a surprise to you or not, Jared, but there are sequels to this film. I believe they were all direct to video. I have seen them all. And
oh no!
The reason I watched them all, I think they were all on Tubi. The reason I watched them all was Wild Things 4 is called Wild Things Foursome, and I couldn't believe that they had made the series so blunt and stupid that, like, we're just throwing another person in there. That's all. That's the only creative difference we're doing.
Yeah, that's where they got by that point, is they were so out of ideas. It's like, hey, look, what if another person was in this this situation?
Exactly.
I kind of knew that there was a Wild Things 2. I did not know that there was a Wild Things 3, Diamonds in the Rough.
Yeah, that was 2005, I believe.
And then I think Wild Things Foursome was like, I looked it up, it was like 2011?
Yeah,
oh, 2010 or 2011.
It was a while ago, or a while later, I should say.
That's why who was still clamoring for a fourth Wild Things by that point?
Well, I've always joked about, like, there's no market for direct-to-video type stuff, and they still get made, and then they just go straight... Now, not in 2010, 2011, but now they go straight to Tubi or straight to Prime. But I can't imagine anyone watches them voluntarily, so yes, I understand the questions around Wild Things Foursome. But yeah, I want to say every single movie is like the exact same thing, but just with worse actors. Because what Wild Things does right is it has a pretty good cast, by and large.
Oh, yeah.
I think Kevin Bacon's really good. He's top billed in this movie, which is surprising, given that I'd say he's like the third character, maybe the second at best. But then you see he's also a producer. It's like, okay. And I thought they were doing alphabetical at first, because Denise Richards is like way lower on the cast list than you would expect, but it goes like Bacon, Dillon, Campbell. It's like, so I don't know what kind of order we're doing. It's not alphabetical, and it's also not accurate to their roles in the film.
Maybe part of Kevin Bacon's negotiations for hanging dong in the movie at one point was that he
that's
gets
a good
top
point.
bill.
Yeah.
Like, look, if I'm going to do this, and if it's going to be that gratuitous, I'm getting top bill.
Well, also the question as to why does he even do that? That's so unnecessary in the film. Is that just to even it out? Like, we've seen enough boobs at this point. We got to fry up some bacon for the women in the crowd or something. I don't understand.
Yeah, gotta even the scales. Yes.
But yeah, so Wild Things is a movie about a guidance counselor who gets accused of raping a high school student. They do about a third of the way. Eventually, he gets accused of a second one, but
yes.
They do cleverly, like a third of the way through the movie, like when the trial is going, they have the news reporters say that they're both 18. It's like, okay, they're doing that so that the rest of the movie isn't weird.
Oh, yeah.
But the whole thing, Denise Richards, who plays Kelly, is the main accuser, and we don't see the alleged rape. If anything, we as viewers are led to believe that nothing happened and she made it up, maybe even out of jealousy, because she clearly wanted something to happen.
Her and her friend are washing Matt Dillon's character's car.
Yes.
And the camera is just like ogling them the entire time.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is a big male gaze movie. And And some films can use that in an interesting way. And I wanted, again, because I have such respect for Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, I wanted there to be like a clever subversion or commentary on the male gaze, because I think there is that when it comes to like real life versus like movie violence in Henry. And if it's here, I didn't see it. I think, and it's difficult to say, but like I suspect Wild Things is satirical at its heart, but it just doesn't translate to me.
And, like, there are maybe attempts at that, like, with some of the lines, because, like, you have
one character Bill Murray's clearly the jokey character. Like, he's Saul Goodman, basically. Like,
he's got a neck brace on, even. I mean, another character...
he walked so Saul Goodman could run, is that character.
Another character calls another character a skanky bitch. Like, it has some of that kind of stuff that you would think is kind of, like, jokey, but it's never quite enough to fully land in that realm of, like, jokey or winking.
Yeah, and I also felt it makes sense with the character. It doesn't make sense thematically, or maybe it does, I can't remember, but the Kevin Bacon character. Kevin Bacon is one of two cops investigating this alleged rape, and it should be noted, of course, that Denise Richards is from a very wealthy family, dead dad, Robert Wagner's involved, maybe he killed another one, and her mom is loaded rich, and her mom seems to have had a previous relationship with the Matt Dillon character. So there's clearly, like, some weird thing going on there with, like, her... She doesn't have a great relationship with the mom. Maybe this is some way to piss her off or get her, eventually get her money. God, I forgot where that was going. I distracted myself with my unleashing the Robert Wagner joke earlier than I thought I would.
To speak to the relationship between the mom and Denise Richards' character, when the dead dad who killed himself gets brought up, her mom yells at her, "He didn't have to kill himself, Kelly," which, like, just seems like such a, like, cold and, like, horrible thing to yell at your daughter.
That's an odd scene, too, because that's the scene where Denise Richards eventually reveals that she was raped. Yeah. And at first, and it's like she's crying, and she claims she's crying because she misses Dad, and the mom's, like, comforting her. And then I thought this was odd, too. Then she says, "I was raped." And yeah, she says it in, like, a whisper. But the mom says, "Speak up, I can't hear you." You'd think... And then when she says it again, then the mom has the reaction. But it's like, why didn't they just do the reaction earlier? I thought that was kind of odd.
Yeah. Oh, not the only odd interaction between two characters in this movie.
No, of course not. And we also, of course... Oh, so I was talking about Kevin Bacon. So Kevin Bacon is one of the two cops. He previously, like a year ago, busted Neve Campbell on a drug possession. And she actually served hard time, which is... Again, if this was a year ago, she was a minor. I don't know about this, but yeah, she is 6 months in prison.
What kind of weight was she moving as a 17-year-old that she had to do time?
Yeah, that's a fair question. It's a very fair question. I mean, we do see later Kevin Bacon's not all that, this is probably it's a trumped up charge, but still, like, I don't know. Initially, when this rape accusation comes out, it's Perez, Kevin Bacon's partner, that thinks Denise Richards is lying. Kevin Bacon, whether he believes her or not, is more or less content to go along with it because the Van Ryan family is super rich, and it's like, we can't, you try and find dirt on this girl, like, this isn't going to work. They own Miami. But then, when the second accuser, Neve Campbell, Susie, comes forward, it's incredibly suspicious how she even brings up the accusation, because she doesn't accuse him until she finds that he hasn't been charged formally yet. Mm-hmm. And in that scene, Kevin Bacon is answering the questions that you typically have a male character ask when he's being insensitive.
Right.
And then, like, Perez gives him a look. But Kevin Bacon's character was not set up to be that. Kevin Bacon's character was set up to be, yeah, I guess we'll believe this. I don't care. I mean, he is an asshole. We know that. And he and Susie do not get along because he's the one who threw her in prison for possession, not even dealing.
I do wonder with Kevin Bacon and his partner, I did take note of the fact that the movie makes sure to have his partner, who is a woman, be the one that is suspicious of, like, whether or not, this woman could be lying about having been raped. I thought that was... That maybe felt like the movie itself being, like, a little bit careful to not have, like, a male partner and saying something like that. But then they kind of
ruin it, because then in that scene with Neve Campbell is what I'm saying, is like it feels like they switched.
They backtracked very quickly.
And then it switches later, too, although it makes a little bit more sense when it switches later, because the whole thing goes, Matt Dillon, he's suspended or loses his job or whatever. He goes to trial, and he has Bill Murray as his sleazy Saul Goodman-like lawyer, and Bill Murray, under intense questioning that is never once objected to until it's way too late. He asked the same question like 3 times. They could have objection asked and answered like, this is nuts.
His whole line of questioning is basically like, you're lying, aren't you? You didn't actually get raped. You just hate Sam Lombardo, don't you? And it's like, that would have gotten thrown out and objected to so quickly.
But he does kind of expose her. He's like, okay, you used to consider him a friend. And then she's like, you're right, I did. And then this happened. And then he's like, but a month after that happened, you were arrested and you called him. But it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then she admits to it's all fabricated. It was Kelly's idea, Denise Richards. And she says, like, it was completely her idea. She wanted to get back at her mom because she was having sex with Matt Dillon. And she's actually in love with him. And then that's, I believe, the skanky bitch line when she gets up and throws like a pitcher of water at Nev Campbell or whatever.
That happens during court. And Bill Murray also tosses his neck brace off in the middle of court.
Yeah, because he wears a neck brace. He says it was because of some insurance thing. And then, when it's clear they win the case or the charges are going to be dropped, he just like, the way you would unbutton a tie, just pulls off his neck brace. I thought that was
a job well done.
Good. So as a result of this, there's an $8.5 million settlement. And I thought the most pointless stuff in the movie was like the pool boy, the Van Ryan pool boy running Matt Dillon off the road and then beating him. And then like at the settlement, at the document signing, which he's there for some reason. I don't know why. He's like, I'll be seeing you. You haven't seen the last of me. And then we never see that character again. That was odd.
I don't even remember what the hell that guy's name was. Like, he runs Matt Dillon off the road while some, like, music is playing that is basically just a Bernard Herrmann ripoff. Like, they just start playing some, like, Hitchcock-type strings.
It's the Reanimator score.
He runs him off the road and then, like, gets out and asks him, like, if he's doing okay or whatever, and then he punches him and then leaves.
Mm-hmm. I want to say, too, this movie, I think this movie, for the most part, makes great use of its setting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, big time.
There's so we mentioned it's Miami. There's also some Everglades stuff. Some of the movie was shot in Fort Lauderdale as well. But outstanding opening credit sequences. We get shots starting in the Everglades, and we see some gators surfacing and going back in. Just great stuff. All like at dusk, like just beautiful looking. Then the camera on a helicopter kind of moves towards downtown. And then eventually more towards, I hesitate to say suburbs, it's probably still Miami, but like the, really rich, nice people area, and that's where the high school is. First thing we see at the high school is them playing lacrosse, which back in 98, only loaded rich people played lacrosse in the U.S., let's be honest.
Oh, for sure. And still mostly is the case.
It's mostly the case. It's a little bit better now, but there's, I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. Because it's like we start in the Everglades, the movie's called Wild Things, right? We see gators. The Everglades are a wild, unconquered place. Then we move downtown, and it's like, okay, it's kind of equating these two things. And then we move to the rich people place, and it's basically saying like all three of these things are the same. Like you got gators, incredibly dangerous, and it's like, but you got suburban housewives, you got high school guidance counselors, like they're dangerous, and if pushed can tear you to pieces too. I thought that was really clever.
It was, and at least one thing that I made a note of that certainly is a point of commonality between this and Candyman is that both movies start by giving us this really great sense of location through these long winding overhead shots that travel.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
they travel a great distance like through the location.
Both films are about classism, at least partially. Yes. Wild Things, much less so, because Nev Campbell, who is basically trailer trash, she's Eminem, is at this, like, rich high school, and it doesn't really make sense. And I guess she's a scholarship kid? I don't know. We do find out later she's got a 200 IQ. Spoilers. But she was also expelled at one point. She was also arrested for drugs, which had nothing to do with the expulsion. The expulsion was like she broke a window or something. So it's like, I don't understand how she's at this school. I do like, too, that Neve Campbell is obviously gorgeous. I like that they try and make her look trashy, and it kind of just makes her look like a hot goth. Like, it doesn't really translate to trashy.
Well, I mean, that's a classic 90s and 2000s move from some of those, like...
Look at The Craft with Neve Campbell.
Yeah, dating comedies, too, where it's like, how can this, like, just...
take off your glasses and all of a sudden this ugly woman is gorgeous. Yes, there's a little bit of that for sure. So, it's a charges are dropped, the settlement's signed. He's got $8.5 million that we find is taken from Kelly's trust. And so he leaves his job. Bill Murray's already bought a sports car, and he's lost his home at this point, and he goes to like a shady, sleazy motel, and he realizes someone's in there, and he sees Denise Richards. It looks like she's holding a gun. Turns out to be a bottle of champagne underneath a towel, and they start celebrating because they were in it all along. They wanted to get the $8.5 million from the mom, and then Neve Campbell shows up too to also celebrate because the three of them were in on it together. That is twist number 1 of 12? There's a lot of twists here.
And a lot of them don't happen until the third act.
A lot of them don't happen until the credits.
Yes, that's true too.
I want to say the sequels did that too, because I didn't remember that in this movie. And I was watching, I don't know, it was Wild Things 2, 3, 4, who knows. And I'm like, why did they do that? The twist isn't fully revealed until the credits. Like, oh, I guess they do that in every Wild Things. I don't know.
That's good movie making when you just save a bunch of really important information for the final seconds of a movie.
I would actually argue it's not important information in this movie.
That's true.
Right? I think we learn everything we need to know before the credits roll, and then everything else is kind of just visualizing what we could already piece together at that point, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is twist number 1, and this is the famous threesome scene, which is hot. It's, again, this is where having a 27 and a 24-year-old or women, as opposed to 18 years old, it just makes you feel more comfortable with the scene than you otherwise would. I'd also point out, I feel like this is probably a common problem with threesomes, but someone ends up largely being left out, and it's Neve Campbell in this scene. And I think what happens is Denise Richards was just far more liberal with her nudity clause, I'm sure, because I think we see Neve Campbell taking off her shirt a few times in this movie. I don't think you ever see her from the front, though. I don't think you truly see Neve Campbell nude, and you see Denise Richards plenty of times.
Yes, and I mean, not only does her character get left out there, but then she keeps getting left out from that point forward in various ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, so her big action in this scene, she pours some champagne on a topless Denise Richards as she kind of straddles. Yeah, so it's that scene. It's a famous scene. You've all seen it, maybe. I don't know how many perverts listen to us, but probably a fair share. We covered Brian De Palma's Body Double, But yeah, so like the whole thing is Matt Dillon's like, listen. We got this money, that's great, but we can't be seen together ever again, or after tonight. And Denise Richards is like, but after tonight? And then that's where they go. Matt Dillon has a really creepy but kind of amusing line when he's pulling up her skirt and pulling down her panties. He says, guidance counselors get to learn all sorts of interesting things or something.
See, stuff like that is why
creepy.
Yes. Even if they're like 18, that still makes it really, really creepy.
At this point, it is like early on, we're with Matt Dillon and we think he's a victim. We don't know for sure, but at this point, we know he's a sleazeball.
Yeah.
So I think it's justifiable in that sense. It's like, yeah, his Educator of the Year award may have been broken by Denise Richards, but it's broken here if it wasn't already shattered,
Yes.
From here on out, Kevin Bacon is very insistent on continuing to investigate. He says Matt Dillon's the mastermind. He knows all three of them. Obviously, we're in on it together. And he confronts the two girls individually, basically just trying to see if one of them will crack. And it works on Neve Campbell. And
yes.
So after he confronts her, and he also thinks she might, if as you mentioned, she's the one left out in the threesome. She's the one left out in general. He thinks that the other two could be planning on killing her because he thinks that there's more of a bond with Denise Richards and Dylan than there is with either one of them and Nev. Another famous scene, so she calls Matt Dillon, can't get a hold of her, so she gets in her beat-up car and drives over to Nev Campbell's mansion, and Kevin Bacon's hiding out in the property filming them, without a warrant, of course. They talk to Matt Dillon on the phone. Matt Dillon's like, you gotta calm her down, but he also like leaves it open to like they may have to kill her, but then the two of them fight, the two girls, and then they eventually start making out in the pool.
So I was far more aware of that scene actually than the other famous scene.
I've seen a movie where they're watching this scene, I think.
But I didn't realize that the pool scene was precipitated by them getting in a fight, and that it gets filmed in the bushes by Kevin Bacon's character. Like what is that supposed to be evidence gathering? Because that's not going to get used anyway.
No, yeah, and that's exactly what he's the next scene. He's watching that over there, and his boss is just like, "Get rid of this! You didn't have a warrant, and you're over there shooting a porno film or whatever."
It could not be more of just like a gross dude move than like this guy's hiding in the bushes and filming these two 18-year-olds like making. Yeah,
maybe this is our moment where we now see that Bacon's as bad as any of them. You could argue it's that moment. You know, and somehow he had called Matt Dillon in at this point. He had brought him in, and then they have to release him, obviously, because there's nothing they can use. And then from then on out, there's a scene where Denise Richards gets Nev Campbell drunk and high and takes her to a beach, and Matt Dillon takes out a champagne bottle and beats her over the head with it. And then they load up the body in the van, and Kevin Bacon is off doing his investigating thing, because at this point, Susie, Nev Campbell, is missing. He finds teeth on the beach. So his boss thinks that Kelly went crazy and killed Susie. So Denise Richards killed Nev Campbell. He's the only one who thinks it's Dylan. And then he has Perez, his partner, get in on following Dylan because he's not allowed to. And she ends up meeting with Dylan. There's a odd scene of sexual tension between the two of them. And then he gives her Denise Richards' highly confidential files and says that she's crazy. She wanted to kill not only her mother, but also another student, Nev Campbell.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. But so when he hears this, Kevin Bacon runs off to the Denise Richards mansion. He claims later he was trying to protect her. I'm not 100% sure what he's... Well, we know what he's trying to do, but I don't know, like, in the context of the movie, what he would say he's trying to do. But yeah, he basically breaks in. We see them fighting in shadow, and then we hear 3 gunshots, and Kevin Bacon comes out injured, shot in the shoulder, and Denise Richards is dead.
Yeah, he basically does like a setup for like a justified shooting, or what would appear to be a justified shooting.
And that's what so the police find that, yes, the shooting was justified, but you're still fired because you shouldn't have been doing any of this. They said something like 2 girls are now dead, and it's like, are they blaming him for Nev Campbell? What? just because I guess he did go and harass Denise Richards, but I don't know. So he's fired, and we pick up with Matt Dillon. I get the impression it's supposed to be like another country, like the Bahamas or something, but it could just be the Keys. I don't know. But he's got like a nice bungalow. He's hanging out. He's chilling. He comes back inside, and boom, Kevin Bacon penis, because he's taking a shower. And so it's the two of them are partners. And it's... So this is twist number...
3, maybe.
Yeah, I would say twist 1 is Nev admitting to lying. Twist 2 is Matt Dillon was in on it. This is twist 3. Okay, so we've got our numbers sorted out here. So Matt Dillon insists that the money won't be in his bank account for another 2 days or so, which Kevin Bacon doesn't really believe, but he goes sailing with him anyways. And what's obviously a setup. Yeah. Obviously a setup.
Hey man, let's go. We just talked about a lot of money, a whole lot of money that
and you already know
both of our lives.
You already believe that I killed one of my partners, and you killed the other one. There was something about you weren't supposed to kill Denise Richards. Like Matt Dillon was like, she's supposed to be down here with me in the Keys or whatever.
Yeah,
but it didn't seem like too big of a deal though. But then he knocks Kevin Bacon overboard, but he holds onto the line and is able to pull himself back up. But then he gets shot with like a harpoon, shot by Neve Campbell, who's blonde now, or has a wig. Is that a wig? I think it's a wig.
It might be a wig.
And he's like, what? You're supposed to be dead. And then she shoots him again, and he falls off, presumably to his death. Sharks. There's a lot of blood in there. There's going to be sharks and stuff. But
so that's plot twist number 4.
Yeah, plot twist number 4. Neve Campbell's actually alive. This one, to me, was the most ludicrous one yet, because when we actually find out what happened with that champagne bottle that we saw covered in blood, it's very stupid.
Yes.
And then we cut back to, seemingly at random, we cut back to Kevin Bacon's old partner. He goes down to the Gator Farm / trailer park, talks to this one woman that I thought was very poorly established as Susie's grandmother. I didn't know she's the grandmother until this scene. And I think this is this Ruby Carrie Snodgrass, which is just an odd name, and that name always stands out to me when I see her in something.
Carrie Snodgrass, Neil Young's former partner, actually,
really?
For a time.
Okay.
Yes.
So Perez is there, and for no reason wants to know about wants to ask, not about Susie, again, who is dead. The police at this point do think Kelly, they more or less close that case that Kelly killed Susie. Or I guess they don't find the body, they just find that they could match the DNA. But Carrie Snodgrass is like, oh, you want to ask about Susie? And she's like, no, I want to ask about Detective Ray Duquette. And it's like, but why? Like, why is she? And then she finds out that Ray Duquette used to come down to that shady part of town all the time. He used to see a prostitute. He got in some fight with this guy named Davey, which is the name that Neve Campbell brings up like twice in the movie, and clearly holds it against him because I guess he kills Davey. And then because, according to Carrie Snodgrass, because Neve Campbell witnessed it, then he did a fake drug charge on her. Mm-hmm. Then she's just like looking through old photos for no reason. And she finds that, I guess there was, so Mr. Van Ryan, who, the guy who shot himself, I guess he had a mistress. And she was pregnant, and he went to feed her to the gators, but she gave birth, and the baby is Neve Campbell, is Susie. And Carrie Snodgrass is like, I raised her like my granddaughter, but she wasn't actually my granddaughter. I'm like, I didn't even know she was supposed to be your granddaughter. I thought you were just like the landlord or something. I didn't know.
There was no reason for that particular plot beat, and yeah, it adds nothing to the movie really in my mind.
I think it's just to make it more Greek mythology, because so she is Sandra Van Ryan, the rich billionaire. She is her half sister, thus making her Denise Richards' aunt. But again, like, who cares? So while all this is happening, then we cut back to Neve Campbell, who is on make it very clear that the sailing boat that they're on is called the Helios, and then she poisons Matt Dillon and makes reference to, is it Medea, one of the Greek mythology things that this movie's clearly doing a thing on. And yeah, so Matt Dillon's dead, and then after all of that, then we cut back to Perez sees that some guy, maybe Neve Campbell's grandfather for all I know, is going to go get rid of a sailing boat, and she's like, is that your boat? And he's like, no, it was Neve Campbell's. And she's like, really? She didn't strike me as a sailor. And then he responds, you'd think he would just say, oh yeah, she liked to sail every now and then. But no, he says, they tested her once. She had a 200 IQ. Like, that's like required to be able to sail?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a very odd response. But that's how the movie like ends. We get like the end, but then immediately we see flashbacks explaining everything. So at this point, we know that Neve Campbell was the one who set this all up, but now we see how exactly. And I think most of these scenes, not all that necessary. I mean, so Neve Campbell hated Kevin Bacon for what he did to her, but also to Davey, this character whose name we hear 2 or 3 times in the movie tops. She, I guess, had something against the Van Ryans because she felt that money was hers, because she should have been part of the family.
Yes.
But she didn't like have something specific against Denise Richards, I don't think. But in all of these flashbacks, we get Matt Dillon, Denise Richards meeting him at a bar whipping out some cocaine in full view of everyone, not being subtle about it at all. She's like, hey, I'm running away, but hey, let's do this for a bit. And then Neve Campbell using photos of that to blackmail him. Apparently, this is what happened. This is why he couldn't respond to her phone calls when she was being arrested, because he was out on a coke bender with Denise Richards, I guess. And then, yeah, we see like all this stuff, and they're setting up Kevin Bacon because they know he's a sleazeball that they can get to. She's telling Matt Dillon, oh yeah, you can convince him to be a partner. He'll love this, especially he thinks that I die. Like, this is going to be great. And then, I guess it's implied that, yes, Kevin Bacon was absolutely not supposed to kill Denise Richards. And that's maybe what got him killed. But, like, at the same time, Neve Campbell was going to kill him anyways because she hates him. So...
Of the credit stuff, the stupidest like flashback was the one showing Kevin Bacon's character killing Denise Richards' character.
Yeah, because like, we knew that.
We witnessed that. We witnessed that from outside the house, sure, but like it that one in particular added nothing because like it went down exactly how we could have imagined it, but based on what we witnessed earlier.
I guess technically we never officially know that Denise Richards did not actually fire a gun. But at the same time, like, we see in that flashback, she's reaching for a gun like she would have. Yes. And also, like, I guess maybe we just have a different understanding of cops in 2024 than in 98. But yeah, is it at all a surprise that he staged everything? Hell no.
No, especially not by that point in the movie with it being over, where we know now clearly that he's a lying, degenerate scumbag.
Yeah. So that's it. What's like the final thing we see? I can't remember. I think. Oh no! Oh God! Yeah, Bill Murray's back. Neve Campbell meets up with Bill Murray again in the Keys or the Bahamas, wherever they are. He gives her all the cash, and he says there's like some money coming into her account, and he's like, with my usual fee, of course. And then she just walks off.
Yep, walks off into the sunset.
And that is Wild Things. Jared, what are your thoughts on the movie as a whole?
Way too many plot twists.
At a certain point, it was just like, can we throw another one in here? Will people still like... Because you could have... I'm sorry if I'm speaking over anything that you would have said here, because I feel like you and I will agree on this. You could have made this movie and had the thing be a courtroom drama, and the twist is twist number 2, that Matt Dillon was secretly in on it with the other two. It would be like a
and that would have been great.
Dumber Primal Fear.
Yeah, and that would have been great.
Yeah, they could have basically taken the first half of the movie, stretched that out to an hour and a half, and that's a movie. Once we get like Kevin Bacon's in on it, and then Neve Campbell isn't dead, and then it's just like, okay, it's just twist after twist after twist. It's like, yeah, this is too much. There's cleverness in here, but at a certain point, it becomes almost comedic how many twists there are. And again, I want to think that this movie is satirical, but I don't see it.
It is basically like a dumb guy trying to make a smart guy movie.
Okay.
In some ways. Because, like, it's trying to be clever, but the cleverness never fully works. And again, with that many plot twists, the thing it, like, exposes to me is, like, you only have that many plot twists if you're not confident in any one particular one of them to carry weight.
And especially how many of them come in, like, the last 20 minutes or so, last 15 minutes. It's like we barely even have a chance to process one before Neve Campbell's blonde and shooting harpoons all over the place. And, yeah, it's a bit much. All of that having been said, as I mentioned, good cast, good actors. Yes. I think everyone's pretty good. This is a big year for Matt Dillon playing scumbags because he delivers one of the all-time great comedic scumbag performances in There's Something About Mary, I believe, also in 1998. Where he's also wearing Hawaiian shirts most of the movie. He's
wonderful in that movie.
Yeah, he's got the sleazy mustache in that one too, but otherwise he dresses the same. Listen, she's not a great actress, but we know why Denise Richards is in the movie. She delivers. Neve Campbell is a better actress. Still not great in this movie, but you also like have to think of it like the character that they wrote. How do you play that character? How do you play a genius 200 IQ who's supposed to be trailer trash? Like, she did the best she could. It's a poorly written character.
Goth trailer trash with a 200 IQ.
She's not even supposed to be goth. It's just that's kind of how they dress her up. That's their way of making her look poor, I think. Yep. And then Kevin Bacon's really good.
Great as a scumbag.
I think he's the best performance in the movie. Bill Murray gets the job done for what he's supposed to do.
Bill Murray is believable in this as a sleazy lawyer. He does it capably, but he still just doesn't fit to me because he's Bill Murray.
I understand that. I do understand that. And again, if the movie were more satirical, that character would probably fit in a bit better. But yeah, I get that. I don't really have a counter. Yeah, so I'm going to say this movie's, like, all in all, I think it's an interesting movie. And I'm not going to say it's a bad movie. I'm going to say it's an okay movie.
And it is enjoyable because of how stupid it gets, I will say.
It does get very stupid. I also mentioned, I think, great, we both said, great use of the locations. Huge missed opportunity. The amount of gators we've seen, we never see an injured or dead person fed to a gator.
I was disappointed
It said
by
that it happened in the past at some point, but I feel like we were setting that up. The amount of gators.
They could have pivoted to some eaten alive type stuff, and they never did.
Yes, absolutely. We need Louis Teague in here directing.
Sweet sugar Candyman.
Yeah, let's jump into.
Let's break that
Candyman.
mirror down. Yeah.
Yes. And like I said, at least one commonality between both these movies. There are others, which I'll get to. This one, like Wild Things, has an incredible opening that gives a long overview shot of Chicago, and about as like long and sweeping of a shot of Chicago as I can think of seeing in a movie. And while that's happening,
and yeah, I was gonna say it's the Philip Glass score, which is brilliant, by the way. And if anyone doesn't know Philip Glass, he's not primarily a film composer, but he is arguably the most accomplished composer of the second half of the 20th century. Like,
yes, at least American composers, for sure.
Yeah,
that's not even arguable.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a big John Cage fan or something, and if you want to go,
the fact that they got him like still blows my mind that they were able to get him.
The music's amazing. All of that having been said, I could have used a Beat City needle drop in this opening because there is a Ferris Bueller quality for sure.
So yeah, you got this long, sweeping overhead shot of Chicago with some beautiful organ-type music playing from Philip Glass. And then eventually you get to Helen Lyle, who's a grad student of U of I Chicago, played pretty well, I thought.
Not UIC, I think it's the University of Chicago. It doesn't really matter. I don't think they ever say.
I think it is UIC.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
I've been to the UIC campus. I saw a couple boxing matches there. I didn't recognize anything.
Yeah, it's Helen Lyle, played by Virginia Madsen, who is really terrific in this. And then her husband, played by extremely 90s actor Xander Berkeley.
Yeah, I want to say I've seen that guy in like one or two other movies, and each time there's like a 20 minutes of like, who the fuck is that guy? What have I seen him in? And then it's like, oh, it's that guy in Candyman. Okay.
Yeah, among other things, he's in T2 Judgment Day. I forget what party.
That's right. Yeah, he's the foster dad. He's the foster dad.
Yep.
I didn't realize that until you just said that just now.
Yep, and he's a professor, and it seems like he teaches on urban legend and folklore, at least when we meet him. And his wife, Virginia Madsen's character is also big on urban legends. And so he's teaching on this, and his wife, she's big on urban legends, and she recently learned about this figure named Candyman who supposedly materializes and kills anyone.
Ted Raimi's wife or girlfriend.
Yes, anyone who says his name, as everybody probably knows, even if you haven't seen the movie, 5 times into a mirror.
5 is bold. Why didn't they just do 3? Because 3 is the Bloody Mary thing. Why did they stretch it to 5?
I don't know, and if I remember correctly, if I remember right, it's a Tupac song where he says, say my name 3 times like Candyman. He doesn't say 5 times.
People probably assume it's 3 because it's 3 in the actual closest urban legend we have to this.
Yes. And, you know, Beetlejuice, of course, the other famous example of saying someone's name a number of times is also 3.
Oh, but yeah, good call, yeah.
So you have that part of it, and she's learning about this Candyman, and part of the legend with him is that he's responsible for, I think, like dozens of deaths at this point at the Cabrini Green housing project in Chicago, which not much of that housing project is left at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably been torn down by now.
Which gets tackled, that part of the story gets tackled in the 2021 movie, which I didn't think was nearly as good as this one.
Interesting. I had the opposite reaction. I haven't seen that movie since it first came to digital video or whatever, but I saw that and I'm like, holy shit, they updated Candyman in the way that I wanted to see Candyman to exist from the beginning. I had this thought. So have you ever seen horror noir
No, I actually have not, as much of a horror fan as I am, I have not gotten around to watching that.
So, someone on that, and I haven't seen this since that came out, since 2019 or whenever, but I remember someone says, like, they had a huge problem with Candyman. So that's, for those not in the know, that's a documentary about black horror, either horror made by black filmmakers, starring black actors. They discuss how black people are often used in horror and stuff like that. And someone brought up this great point, like, I have a huge problem with Candyman. Candyman was a victim of racism. He was a slave who was killed because he had a relationship with a white woman. And yet he's out here terrorizing black people. Why?
Yes.
And I think that is a significant issue, actually. The film isn't structured in a way where you call that into question, but that's one of those things where it's like, after you watch it, you can just be kind of like, why did they do it that way?
So I was thinking about that, and I don't necessarily know if I entirely buy this, but I was thinking that what made sense maybe, because late in the movie, I'll jump ahead for just a second, there's this moment between Helen, Virginia Madsen's character in Candyman, that is kind of surprising, because the movie gets to be like a gothic kind of romance at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But he still does these, like, very terrible things to Helen. And I was thinking about that in relation to, like, what you were saying about killing people in the black community. And I was thinking about, like, this figure kind of forged out of, genuine tragedy, and how those sorts of figures can sometimes repay that tragedy even onto those, like, close to them. Which would maybe explain that. It's a shaky explanation, maybe, but I think that is what makes the most sense if you're looking for something.
Okay, no, and I buy that. I'm just saying, personally, thematically, I would have found it maybe more satisfying if
yes,
it were that. But I do buy that. I think that's a possible reading for sure.
Yeah, and so you have Helen, and then you have her friend Bernadette, who's played by Cassie Lemons, who actually directed the Whitney Houston movie from 2 years ago. They try saying Candyman's name, and they get nowhere. And eventually,
do they say it 5 times though, or did they cut it short?
They do, and they say it kind of stilted too. Where, like, I think they say it like 4 times, and they kind of do the nervous, like, ooh, should we?
That's similar to Ted Raimi's girlfriend too,
yes.
Something like that, where she actually like went. Well, Ted Raimi said it 4 times, and she goes back and 5 minutes later says it a 5th time, and then she gets killed. Yeah,
that's a really long gap there. So I wonder how long of a gap you could get away with, and he still shows up.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, in that one too, it's 2 different people. Like, she only said it once. Does that count?
Yes. Yeah. What kind of math is Candyman doing with whether or not to show up? So yeah, they try to call Candyman up. He doesn't show up, and so eventually Helen and Bernadette decide to visit Cabrini Green to see if they can learn more about the legend. And at first they get there and they're harassed by some of the tenants, which is completely understandable because you have these 2 totally out of place women just kind of wandering around.
They look like cops, is what they say. Yeah,
they look like cops. And after they get harassed for a little bit, they're able to find a room that's kind of like a shrine to Candyman that, among other things, has this line that then you see a number of times the rest of the movie, sweets to the sweet. And then they interview a neighbor of one of the most recent victims of Candyman. And just based off of, like, them going to Cabrini Green once and interviewing a neighbor and seeing a shrine, that's enough for Helen to start shit-talking at a dinner with faculty friends of her husband, including a guy who has already written on Candyman and is able to give his whole story. She's, like, already talking about how, like, what I have is going to blow your thing out of the water, basically.
Yeah, that character, that British, the Stephen Fry guy, I hate that character. I mean, he's very brief in this movie, but what I hate most about him, I don't know if you've seen the Candyman sequels from the 90s. They're not worth watching. There were only 2 of them. They were both pretty bad. I think Candyman 2 or maybe Candyman 3 opens with him, and he's like talking at dinner. And I guess what I hate is that the film assumes you remember him. And it's he's such a small part in the first film. Come on. And I think he gets killed as, like, the opening stinger. But, like, we don't care who this guy is. Like, come on.
No, all he is the character to show up and give the
exposition.
The exposition, yes. And the exposition basically is that, like, Candyman was a real person and was the victim of this horrific racial violence. He's the son of a former slave. The father was able to make a name for himself, and because of that, the son was able to become a painter who mostly does, like, portraitures of like the upper crust of like the Chicago area, and he eventually falls in love with a white woman, and they conceive a child, and then Candyman is then set upon by a lynch mob called by the woman's father, and has his hand cut off before being smeared with honey, and then attacked by bees, and then that all wasn't enough, set on fire atop a pyre, which the whole pyre thing comes back
full
later
Wicker
on.
Man remake is what we call
Yes.
that.
And as far as origin stories go for a horror movie villain, it's maybe the most sympathetic one there is, and I don't even know what would be a close second. What would be a close second? Yeah, okay, that's fair. Because
I'm attempting to bring up. This has been a running theme of the podcast. I attempt to work Basket Case into every episode. Basically, it's surprisingly relevant for most films.
But yeah, like it's incredibly sympathetic because, like I said, it's someone who's the victim of a truly heinous crime and did nothing wrong whatsoever to deserve what happened.
This is it'd be like if Dule Hill in Holes became a serial killer.
Yeah, like
I don't know.
Like, like Freddy was like a child murderer, so whatever.
Sure. There's nothing sympathetic about Freddy. Nothing.
I mean, Jason drowned, and like that was a horrible accident, but like that really wasn't that much of the camp counselor's fault. They didn't want him.
Well,
to drown.
And Jason's not a character too. Like,
yeah, that too. He's just an avatar for killing.
Force of. Yeah.
But yeah, so after this big exposition dump, Helen then goes back to the project, back to Cabrini Green, and she runs into this kid, Jake. Shout out to Jake, played by DeLon Guy. My girlfriend said near the end, when the funeral pyre comes back up, that Jake looked very pensive, and he definitely, that was some good kid acting going on with
he's
DeLon
really
Guy
in this movie, yeah.
Yes, he's very suspicious of Helen, even after she kind of is like friendly with him. Mm-hmm. And so he tells her about this kid from the neighborhood who was killed by Candyman in a bathroom. And so she goes to check this bathroom out, and it's horrible. It seemed like there was blood or maybe paint smeared all over the walls saying "Sweets and Sweet," but it also seemed like there was maybe like shit smeared all over the walls.
I was going to say I'm not saying it's anything but shit. This reminds me of the scene in Daddy Daycare where Eddie Murphy goes into the bathroom and checks out what the kid has done to it because he insists that
I missed. That's all I remember from that movie is I missed. What do you mean you
missed?
I
missed. That was the line, yes.
She goes to check it out, check out the bathroom, and she gets attacked by a guy with a hook hand who looks like what we're to believe Candyman looks like. Mm-hmm. And that guy ends up going to jail almost immediately. And I don't really understand why the guy in his gang decided to attack Helen. There wasn't really an upside for them to do that. They could have just like menacingly threatened her to leave.
Yeah, that's fair. She
gets past the attack, and then the real Candyman comes to her and explains to her that now he's basically going to have to unleash an unholy killing spree lest people, kind of begin to think he isn't real. And if they think he isn't real, that's going to destroy the power he has as this big myth.
Yeah, and of course played by Tony Todd, who is mainly, I mean, he's done other stuff, but he has that horror icon status pretty much just on Candyman. Like, yeah, he's in the Night of the Living Dead remake, but like now he can write his own checks as insert horror legend to cameo in modern horror movie, starting at least with Final Destination.
Yes, which is iconic in and of its own because he is basically death in those movies.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, he is great as Candyman. They must do something with his voice because he does have a very deep voice, but it is like preternaturally deep in this movie. They must echo it, delay it, do something with it, but it sounds very creepy, but like weirdly seductive and like calming in a way. It's so smooth, it's so deep, it's so powerful.
I saw somebody compare him almost to like Orson Welles in terms of presence with like his voice and like just his like appearance and everything like that, and I think that's a good comparison. Or like another
he
one
shows up here. It vaguely reminds me of, I just saw this scene the other day because I used a clip of it in a YouTube video, but when he shows up in The Third Man, when the light turns on above him and you just see him for the first time, and he's just like against a 17th century brick wall or whatever, there is a little bit of The Third Man here.
It's what I like to call, and John Goodman also has this, like it can be malevolent but still affable even when seeming malevolent.
Okay.
he shows up to Helen in this parking lot and tells her what's going to happen now. And then Helen wakes up covered in blood in the home of Anne Marie, the woman from Cabrini Green that Helen interviewed earlier.
A decapitated Rottweiler.
That scene was really grisly. I was kind of gobsmacked by how it was shot and how it played out. She wakes up.
And just how quick it is, how quick we transition from it. Like, he comes and he kind of threatens her, and it's like, okay, we're going to see this and come back in 15 minutes or so. But, like, no, immediately she wakes up covered in blood. There's so much blood.
Yeah, there's blood everywhere. The dog's been decapitated. And the baby, Anne Marie's baby, is missing. And, like, there's blood, like, all in the crib. And
it looks like the baby was killed here, too.
It looks like the beginning of Max Payne, if anyone ever played Max Payne, which is all about his kid getting murdered.
I got nothing. But I'm sure someone out there knows what you're talking about, yeah.
But, yeah, from there, Helen is arrested, understandably, because she wakes up covered in blood and then wields a knife in a fight with Anne Marie. Right as the cops show up, they see her wielding a knife. So she's arrested and then bailed out of jail with the bare minimum of help from her husband, who was off banging.
Was it husband or boyfriend?
I think they're married. I think so.
I don't remember them being married, but it's a committed relationship, if nothing else.
For sure.
I mean, that's like, it's a long-term relationship. I should say it's not committed. That's very clear on his end, but
yeah, because they live together and the whole thing, and so yeah, he bails her out after she tried to call him and no one answered. And
very Matt Dillon.
Yes, another very Matt Dillon thing, I guess, is the idea of sleeping with your students.
That's what I was going to comment on that too. Yeah, because I assume she was originally his student.
Yeah. So yeah, Helen gets bailed out for the first time, and then she has almost immediately another moment of catatonia after she gets visited again by Candyman, and this time he kind of attacks her, and she comes to in her apartment and she finds that her friend Bernadette has been killed, and the police show up again, and yet again she like picks up a weapon. I forget what it is this time, like as the police are showing up, and my note at that point was that Helen really needs to stop picking up weapons every single time she snaps out of a fugue state. Like, it seems like a really bad idea to do that. Like, you've just woken up and you're fumbling around covered in blood, and it's like, oh, let me grab this knife. That'll go well.
Sure. That's fair.
And yeah, then she gets committed to a psych hospital, which probably should have happened after the first time. And she breaks out of it, by this time summoning Candyman intentionally.
Oh my god, this scene is unbelievable. This scene is covered in Bravo's 100 scariest movie moments that I remember watching. That was a very nostalgic television program for me as a kid. That was my introduction to movies like Suspiria and Audition. This was somewhere in that top 100, but this is so amazing. Because this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only real time we see him use his hook.
Yeah, no, I unless I'm missing something, it is. Yeah, because he doesn't, when he attacks her, like, well, maybe he does it when he attacks Helen. I can't remember now. But,
well, the only time he kills someone with a hook,
yes.
At least.
And it is
as violent as you could expect.
Yeah, he
and
goes
also
when
we say hook, don't think Buster Blue. Think I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It is a hook straight out of like the urban legend kind of thing of like the hook on the car type of deal. So yeah, he's summoned and he brutally murders the psychiatrist, and then like, you know, he flies out the window, basically very magic realism almost kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie really is a very smart horror film in a lot of ways, but I did have my only oh come on moment during this stretch when Helen jumps from one level of the psych hospital down to another while alarms are blaring, and she's able to convince a nurse to let her in a window.
And then
that's and then she immediately attacks the nurse.
Why not just have her on the second floor and have her like jump out at that point?
That would have been better. And so she gets away. She goes back to her apartment where she gets confirmation now that Trevor is in fact sleeping around and is repainting the old place with the college student he's with.
I kind of like the color. I mean, she says it's a terrible color scheme. I thought it looked decent.
I'm also wondering how long they had been at it, because there was still a lot that had not been painted salmon.
Well, the actual painting stuff, but yeah, but it's we don't know how long he's been with that girl. We don't know really how long she's been away. It's implied at this point it's been a while.
It's been at least like a month, I think the psychiatrist even says, maybe.
And no one's found the baby yet, still.
No. And so she, after she gets pissed off seeing Trevor with another woman, she goes back to Cabrini Green, and she finds Candyman and the missing baby, and she decides to make a deal with Candyman to give herself up for the sake of the kid, and Candyman kisses her, and all these bees come swarming out of his mouth.
Which we have to point out was done practically. Tony Todd, in actuality, had like hundreds of bees in his mouth.
He had a clause in his contract to get paid based on how many times he got stung by bees, if I'm remembering that really
That's
funny
awesome.
note correctly. Yeah, so he made a chunk of change just from doing that.
Because he got stung like crazy, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so he kisses her as the bees come flying out of his mouth, and then she blacks out again, and she sees a mural of Candyman's kind of story that we heard earlier in the movie. Then she notices that she bears a really striking resemblance to Candyman's lover that he was killed over. So
Which I thought was like we implied already. I thought we kind of like could have put that together.
Yeah,
you know.
But that then, of course, between that and like the way the movie's been going already, and the music from Philip Glass really drives home that this is like a very faded, gothic tinged kind of romance.
Yeah, that aspect of the story is very much the 1932 Mummy. There's a bit of 1931
that's
Dracula
a good comparison
in there. Yeah, and the music is very like Phantom.
Yes, and it's interesting. It's interesting you mention Dracula in particular because, like, people have pointed out that it is in many ways just a vampire type of story, basically. You have this person who's kind of leeching these things away from this woman who nonetheless is, like, allured to him in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the vampire, there's the seduction.
Yeah, and then the film kind of peaks inside of a funeral pyre where that's, like... It's a funeral pyre made up of just like all kinds of discarded items from the housing project. So there's like there's old like, you know, besotted mattresses and like just random pieces of wood. And the movie kind of peaks inside of this. They're inside the funeral pyre itself, and Candyman tries to have Helen and the child, Anthony, both burned alive. But Helen escapes with the baby, and Candyman, in quotes, dies. And then Helen later succumbs to her injuries, but the kid is okay.
In this moment, too, that the black community recognizes that she's a hero. Which
yes.
I think I would have taken a little bit more time to figure that out if I were one of them, you know? Because it's like, okay, she has the baby now, but like for months it was assumed that she took the baby.
Yeah, there is that whole issue.
Like, who's to say she didn't put it there?
Yeah, that's the other thing, is, like, how did that baby end up there in the first place?
Well, that happens through Candyman magic. I'm okay with that. I do think if you are just a regular Joe, you think that Helen found the baby in there, then I think you question, like, well, did she bring the baby in there? How did any of this happen? Like,
it does seem like, even with them... You know, the ones that would be closest to the legend, they're aware of it and they're fluent in it, and they've maybe even basically witnessed it as close to firsthand as you can, but it's still, you never get entirely a sense of how much they truly believe it's actually real or not, I would say.
That's fair, yeah. Like, that kid believes it, but he's a kid. Like, as a kid, you believe stuff.
So Helen dies, and then Trevor is suddenly sad about Helen dying, and he's crying into a mirror, saying Helen's name over and over and over and over again.
The funeral. Initially, it's like just the husband and his girlfriend. They're like alone. The funeral's wrapping up, and then the entire Cabrini Green community comes together. It's like the ending of Schindler's List, where they all place the rocks on the grave.
In this case, they don't place a bunch of rocks. They just place a single hook. They dropped the...
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I couldn't remember what they brought.
So they all show up and pay their tribute by burying this hook into the grave. And then, you know, Trevor's all sad now, and he's back home with his college student girlfriend, who is angrily making some kind of steak dinner in the other room, and not doing a good job of it, because she's angry, so...
Is she boiling it? I mean, it could be worse.
Yeah, not chopping it very well. And while she's doing that in the kitchen, Trevor is in the bathroom crying into a mirror, and he's saying Helen's name over and over again, five times in fact. And wouldn't you know it, that summons Helen, and she kills Trevor as the new woman is in the other room. So Helen has become this kind of mythic figure herself, and we at the very end Candy Woman, Candyman, Candy Woman, and she's become this mythic figure too. And as the movie kind of closes, we now see that she is in the mural I talked about earlier alongside Candyman.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, especially with the mural, one of the aesthetic choices that I really liked a lot with the movie is that every so often the mural of Candyman with his mouth wide open, which is like something you'd see on a carnival ride.
Yeah,
Sure. That you would like ride into. It'll flash and then disappear again in these kind of key moments, and it's disorienting, but it's really this, I think it's a cool visualization of like how much a legend can start to ingratiate itself into different parts of your life, because she sees it in different places. Like it flashes in like totally disparate moments and in different locations. It's kind of taking over her life basically. And I kind of like that as like a style choice, I think.
As like an Exorcist the version you've never seen type thing.
Yeah. And then another thing I really liked in terms of the aesthetics, or maybe even the sets maybe, a review I saw on Letterboxd from Willow McClay kind of noted how in the movie there's this like, especially like in the condo that Helen and boyfriend have, there's like this decaying architecture within this like finer architecture basically, and I like the note of that, and I like that as a visual metaphor, the like idea that there are so many cases in this country of just building atop these very ugly things and just pushing them down as far as you can rather than like actually reckoning with them.
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, you know, that's obviously speaking to...
I mean, you say that's a thing in this country. I would like to point
yes.
out the historical Troy. Dig deep enough, there's like 3 different versions of that city or something like that. Maybe it's been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the case of Candyman, you know, what's being pushed down and buried is obviously, you know, racial violence being, you know, meted out on black bodies. Yeah, but you know, there's like a version of the architecture metaphor thing too in other horror movies like The Shining, where this like seemingly really nice hotel is built upon this indigenous, you know, burial ground, and that's not really reckoned with, and you know, maybe that's not the reason everything.
Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Poltergeist is the classic example, the film that truly draws attention to that.
And so, yeah, I really liked that kind of choice too of using these locations to sort of, you know, kind of speak to some of what the movie is trying to get at with its storytelling and its plot.
Well, yeah, and as for the location itself, the Cabrini Green projects, which is like both building complex and neighborhood because it's like that big. When I first saw this movie, I wasn't familiar with Cabrini Green. I live in Milwaukee. I've close to Chicago. My mom grew up in Chicago. She was very familiar with Cabrini Green and its reputation, and its reputation is very much how it's presented in the movie. But the one I was familiar with, which is perhaps a more interesting historical document because of the many reasons for its failure, and I might not be pronouncing it right, but the Pruitt Ego in St. Louis. That was like a very similar thing to Cabrini Green, I guess, where there were like issues of the actual design and the whole collapse of that. And I say collapse, like not like a literal collapse, but they tore it down after like 15 years because it was like such a failure. But it was like designed to be this building that would like defeat poverty. And it made things so much worse. And then there's just this like idea of being isolated in a community like that's, whether it's designed to or not, just kind of keeps you within it and keeps you from the outside of the world. Like Helen as this character is someone who has access to the entire city, and then she keeps going there, and she is an outsider until Candyman basically makes her, for lack of a better term, like an eternal resident of it. Like, yes. I think that stuff's really interesting. As for I read something about why they chose Cabrini Green. So this is a story by Clive Barker. Do you remember the name of the story? It's not Candyman. It's
No, it's like
the Forbidden. I was going to say I was going to say the Unforgiven. It was the Forbidden. It's a short story by Clive Barker. Clive Barker's British. I don't know how much of the racial tension, the racial aspect of it was in his original story. I haven't read it. I would guess there's at least some kind of thing about class, but I understand the story takes place in Liverpool. They decided to set it in the U.S. Bernard Rose said, like, in particular, Cabrini Green was, like, perfect because, A, it has a reputation in Chicago, but also, B, visually, it is smack dab in the middle of things, and if it is like, so self-contained, you leave it, and you're in a completely different world, like, in any direction. The fact that it's, I guess, so different from everything around it is kind of interesting. I mean, I can't speak too much to that being true. I'll just take Bernard Rose's word on it, but I think that's interesting. And I do think, again, what I was saying about Helen, you see her in other parts of Chicago. It's just like such a visual difference when she's in Cabrini Green. You know you're in completely different places just immediately by the look of them. You would think they were in completely different cities even. Yeah. With the difference in look. Absolutely. It's like Bridesmaids comparing Chicago to Milwaukee. But no, I think Candyman is a really good movie. It's very close to being a great movie. It's not quite there for me, and I think it comes down to the storytelling isn't quite as good as I think it could have been. I think you brought up the gothic romance aspect, and I compared that to some of the Universal monsters, and I think that's perfectly fair. But it's the communication about that is like kind of weird. Like when he first shows up to kind of terrorize / seduce her, because it really is both, he just kind of shows up. That felt weird. As great as that scene is in the parking garage, like he does just kind of like appear in a parking lot, no less, which is kind of a weird like first encounter of such an iconic character. Yeah, and then like the romance part, like I again, as good as I think Virginia Madsen is in playing this part, I think she's really good in the scenes where she's grappling with the idea that she's possibly insane, like when they're showing her the video of her when she's saying Candyman is under the bed and there's like nothing there. Like her reaction to that is great. But I never truly believe that she is being seduced by Candyman. And I guess the story could function without her truly. Like she could just be victim all the way. But I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I know he says not. Be my victim, but they're trying to do something a little bit more for that doesn't quite work for me. Another reason, like, it's definitely what they're trying to get across is because that's not even the only Clive Barker story where you have this push and pull between this, like, very kind of, like, you know, messed up, like, romantic element of some kind. And Midnight Meat Train, horror. That's right. Yeah. No, Hellraiser, obviously. No, I know what you mean. The Hellbound Heart, of course. Yeah, I think she sells it pretty well, but like they maybe could have used another scene or two to really develop a fuller like romantic feel to it, maybe than just like the kiss with like the bees and everything like that. I think so for sure, and I think that there could have been like, I don't know, maybe you know, I don't want I always hesitate to try and like rewrite these movies because, you know, I'm trying to solve problems that might only be problems for me. But I'm thinking of, like, when she's got her, again, I didn't think it was husband. I thought it was just boyfriend, but serious boyfriend. And then, like, obviously when her best friend dies and all that, like, everyone's, like, abandoning her. And I thought, like, he could have played into that. Like, I will not leave you. And again, I don't really feel like he does do that. I don't know. Someone else could watch this and completely disagree with me. But that's my truth, damn it. Yes. So any other thoughts on Candyman? Or do we want to go into which movie do we prefer? No, I love that. I had not actually, as big as a horror fan as I am, this was one of my blind spots of like... Yeah, these were both first watches for you, I believe, right? Yep, and like, I mean, you know, Candyman in particular is like a touchstone of, you know, 90s horror. It's something like that, you know, and Silence of the Lambs immediately come to mind for the 90s Scream, obviously. Blair Witch, Sixth Sense, yeah. And it was the only one of those I had not seen, and I really, really loved it. I appreciated how ambitious it was, and, you know, maybe it didn't land everything in terms of the ambition of what it was trying to communicate, but I appreciate when any horror movie is being that ambitious in the first place. Well, and also, like, you consider this, we consider this a slasher movie, which is how most people would categorize it anyways, like, the slasher is one of the least creative genres to ever exist. It's basically rinse and repeat. for any significant shakeup, I respect it. Like A Nightmare on Elm Street obviously shook it up, did something different with it, and that's awesome. It has its own imitators. Candyman taking that kind of slasher premise, creating a truly unique character, a character that, like you said, as sympathetic a background for any horror antagonist as we've ever seen, basically, and telling the story in a way that where there is violence, there is disturbing stuff, disturbing imagery. There's more blood in this movie than you might expect for being, for the most part, a classy movie as far as horror movies go. Mm-hmm. For going that different route when they could have just gone Halloween, Friday the 13th, you know, I'm not saying they would have gone as stupid as Leprechaun, but like those kinds of movies.
Yeah. And they,
you know,
they
have their place, but like this, I will always respect something that does something different.
So yeah, I think I came away being a bigger fan of Candyman, although I really did enjoy Wild Things for just how ludicrous it gets.
Yeah, and that's really, when it comes down to it, which of these two movies do I prefer? Wild Things, Candyman. I can confidently say Candyman is a good movie. I cannot confidently say that about Wild Things. Wild Things might be brilliant. It might be terrible. I'm not 100% sure. It's definitely interesting. It's definitely entertaining. Candyman just misses on being like an all-time great for me. There's something not quite there, but it is very good. It's hard to think of a more atmospheric horror film from the 90s. Like when I think atmospheric horror, generally I'm going to think old school, the Gothic, the 30s, the Hammer movies, and then like some recent stuff, some A24 stuff. Some, I guess you brought it up earlier. I hate doing this because I'm in the vast minority on The Shining. I don't care for The Shining. Someone might say The Shining's the most atmospheric horror movie ever, whatever. But I don't know. Candyman is very atmospheric. It is. It makes you feel a certain way.
Absolutely. You get a very good understanding of that location and what it's all about through the movie.
Yeah, and Wild Things, on the other hand, is really just a film. I guess it makes you feel something. Wild Things is daring you to keep your pants on the entire runtime, basically. That's all the Wild... I mean, it's more than that because it is plot twists, which there's at least one clever plot twist in there that kind of loses its cleverness based on... They keep adding to it. You keep adding on floors to a building. You can't get wider. You have to get thinner or stay the same, and it gets really thin at the end there.
I would say that Candyman makes you feel things. Wild Things makes you feel like you need to take a shower.
Yeah, you might even be greeted by Kevin Bacon in that shower.
Oh gosh.
So, the question: how does this work as a drive-in double feature?
Well, it worked. It's a very niche genre of movies where there are teachers involved with their students. Well, the problem is one of the things that I was going to say connects them, but it doesn't since it's all a ruse. But if you're just going through the first chunk of Wild Things, another thing they have in common is these like sorts of accusations like ruining someone, in the case of Candyman, killing him. But then that all turns out to be BS with Wild Things, so you can't even really link those that way.
Yeah. Yeah, Wild Things is not The Hunt.
No. So, yeah, I would say that very niche thing with the teachers, but then also, as we talked about already, both do have, in their own ways, a good use and even sense of the location and where these things are taking place.
And that, to me, is where I'm going to say this is a good double feature in a very specific instance. Mm-hmm. If you're from Chicago or Miami, and you're hanging out with someone who is from the other city,
there you go.
This is a great double feature. This is an awesome double feature, because this is Candyman. It's not the signature Chicago movie, you know, Ferris Bueller, Blues Brothers. You could go to any kind of Depression-era gangster movie, The Sting, The Untouchables. I'm going to say The Wild Things might be the signature Miami movie, at least of the movies I've seen. What is it competing with? The Birdcage? What else? The Birdcage, most of the movie just takes place in an apartment. I can't give it to The Birdcage. It's a better movie than Wild Things.
Because of how much love I have for it, gotta be Miami Vice.
Oh, well, Miami... Okay, I've never seen the Miami Vice movie. Okay, and I was going to say, you could say Scarface also. I wasn't thinking of Scarface. Yeah, it's probably Scarface, but Wild Things is up there. And Wild Things is a wonderful depiction of Miami.
Yeah, because Miami, like Miami Vice and Scarface, like, they make Miami look cool, and this is the one that does the best job of, like, the sleaziness of
it makes Miami look cool, but also shows you the sleaze that if you look just a little closer.
Yeah.
And you get the Everglades stuff. And again, they didn't use the Everglades the way they should have. They should have fed someone to an alligator. I don't know why they didn't.
Maybe that can be in Wild Things 5-some.
Yeah, 5-some. they're going to reboot it, just Wild Things, thruple or something. They're going to update on the terms used.
No, Wild Things, polycule. That's what it would be, maybe.
Okay, there we go, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
and... yes, because I still can't believe there's a film called Wild Things Foursome. It's all of our creativity is going to. It's I'm just thinking of the James Cameron story where he puts the S on the word alien and then puts a $sign through it. I'm picturing someone writing foursome on a dry erase board and putting the $sign through the S in the middle of the word. And it doesn't quite have the same ring to it, but someone still said yes. All right. Well, Jared, thank you very much for joining me. I think this was a blast.
No, it wasn't. I appreciate doing this because of how random both of the times I've been on the pairings of movies have been.
I mean, that's you live and die by the random number generator. Occasionally you get gold. Occasionally you get
Delta Force.
Yeah, occasionally you get Chuck Norris, but a lot of times we get something in between. And I think in this case we got Candyman is fairly close to gold, and Wild Things is a hell of a lot more interesting than any film Chuck Norris ever made. So,
yes.
On that note, next time when I record next, Jim will be back. We will be doing, oh God, he's got more pervert stuff. We're doing Caligula. The Malcolm McDowell Penthouse Films produced film. And we're doing Nightmare Sisters from director David Dakota, starring Linnea Quigley, Michelle Bauer, and Brink Stevens. The big three together at last. I think they only did 2 movies together. I think it's that and Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama. And might be controversial, but I'm going to say Nightmare Sisters is better than Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama. So
I don't know if anyone would fight you on such an allegation.
Don't say that. People will. Yeah, so please join us for that. And in the meantime, if you're gonna say a word into a mirror, only say it 3 times. 5 is too much.
Don't push it.
Don't push it. Also, whether they're 18 or not, leave your students alone. Let's add that as well.
Yes.